Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our webinar, The Purpose of Higher Education. For anyone who does not know me, my name is Winston Brady, and I'm a humanities teacher and the director of Thales Press. And it is such an honor to introduce our guest today, Dr. Jenna Robinson of the James G. Martin Center for Academic Renewal. I'll provide a few housekeeping details and then an introduction for our speaker. As always, this webinar is being recorded and will be released on our Thales Press YouTube channel and our Developing Classical Thinkers podcast. That way, you can find it easily once everything is said and done. Q&A will follow after the webinar over Zoom. You can type your questions into the special Q&A chat box, with Q&A being administered by me at the end of the webinar. Our host, though, I will warn you, may from time to time ask questions, which you can answer in either the Q&A box or the Zoom chat. We'll monitor both. Now to introduce our distinguished guest. Dr. Jenna Robinson has been with the Martin Center since 2007 as Campus Outreach Coordinator, and she later became the Center's Director of Outreach. Currently, she serves as the President of the Martin Center. The Martin Center is a nonprofit organization dedicated to improving the landscape of higher education in the United States. Dr. Robinson has worked at other area nonprofits, including the John Locke Foundation. She completed her undergraduate work in political science and French at NC State, and she received a doctorate from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in political science. Dr. Robinson's work has appeared in numerous publications, including the Investor's Business Daily, Forbes, the American Thinker, Carolina Journal, and the Raleigh News and Observer. Dr. Robinson, it is such a joy to have you as part of our Thales Press webinar series, and I'm very much looking forward to your talk on the goals and the purpose of higher education. And with that, I can turn it over to you.
Thank you, Winston. It's wonderful to be here. And as you know, I'm a great admirer of everything you do at Thales Academy, Thales Press, and Thales College. I think it's a wonderful addition to everything, all the good things going on here in Raleigh. And so my talk today is about why college. What is the purpose of higher education? And on the very first slide, there was a picture of a cathedral. And that is because I'm going to use the cathedral as a metaphor for higher education, actually for education in general. A cathedral is both beautiful and functional. It is also the project of a lifetime. It's not something that gets built overnight or even in 4 years or 12 years or 16 years. And it's built to facilitate something higher, something beautiful, and something purposeful. It's built to facilitate worship, but education is built to facilitate something else, and that is human flourishing. The word eudaimonia, I'm always going to mess this up. Eudaimonia is the Greek word for the condition of human flourishing, and it's a word that Aristotle uses a lot. And I am going to be borrowing some concepts from Aristotle today. So living in eudaimonia means being the best human being that you can be. There's more to it than that. It consists of the good performance of whatever is the characteristic functions of human beings. And so we have to look deeper into, what does that mean? What is that? Aristotle believes that the characteristic function of human beings, which distinguishes us from all other kinds of living things, is our ability to reason. So I'll quote Aristotle here from the Nicomachean Ethics. If the function of man is an activity of soul which follows or implies a rational principle, and if the human good is the good performance of that function, then the human good turns out to be rational activity of soul in accordance with virtue, or rational activity performed virtuously or excellently. I heard it put much more succinctly on the Anchored podcast a few weeks ago. It was a college president there talking about what he does in his role. And he said that in order to flourish, students must become or learn to become thoughtful doers. So in order to become thoughtful doers, everyone needs, according to Aristotle again, 3 types of knowledge. Theoretical wisdom, which is knowledge for its own sake. Practical wisdom, which is both good judgment and excellence of character and habits. And technical wisdom or skills. So in order to flourish, in order to have eudaimonia, I really should have practiced that. You have to have all these types of knowledge. And my own addition to Aristotle's types of wisdom, if I may, it's very presumptuous to add on to Aristotle, but my own addition to that is that you need basic facts. Basic facts must precede all the types of wisdom that Aristotle talks about. And basic facts are the foundation of that cathedral that you're building, the cathedral of education. And for the most part, I'm not going to talk a whole lot about basic facts because those should be covered really well in K-12 education. And I'll talk a little, but I will talk a little bit more about the importance of basic facts in just a moment when I talk about the general education curriculum. So with all that in mind, that you're going to have, have knowledge inside your cathedral, we can talk about, what is higher education? What is higher education building? Well, it is the first adult step to becoming a thoughtful doer, to balancing the different types of flourishing. And it's the first undertaking that a student will take to becoming a mature thinker on the journey to human flourishing. So now that we understand the purpose, we can talk about how to go about doing that. And I'm going to borrow a concept from Aristotle again. Aristotle says that virtues are balanced. You must find balance in virtue. And the challenge to find that balance in education is that creating thoughtfulness or facilitating thoughtfulness and preparing students to do things don't necessarily look the same. So once again, I'm going to look to Aristotle. So he says, when pursuing virtue, he suggests aiming for the middle state between excess and deficiency. And we can do the same thing in education by creating a balance. Aristotle divides education into 2 different categories: liberal education and illiberal education. And obviously both of those terms in modern America are very, very loaded and fraught terms, but I'm going to talk about Aristotle's meaning for those terms. So Aristotle says that it is clear that there are branches of learning and education which we must study with a view to the enjoyment of leisure, and those are to be valued for their own sake. That type of education he calls liberal, things we value for its own sake, learning for the sake of learning. Whereas those kinds of knowledge which are useful in business are deemed necessary and exist for the sake of other things. So everything, the practical learning, the learning that we need in order to thrive in business and in the practical life skills that we need, he considers those illiberal. And those terms themselves are not, neither one is good nor bad. You need both of those things in order to thrive. And in the metaphor of the cathedral, illiberal education are the functional parts of the cathedral, the things that keep the cathedral from falling down. And liberal are the beautiful parts of the cathedral. And both are essential to the function of the cathedral. Both are essential to education. And students know this intuitively. So when students are asked what they want out of college, they say that they both want liberal and illiberal types of education. This is according to the Higher Education Research Institute out of UCLA. They do a freshman survey every year. So this comes from that freshman survey, the most recent one. And students say that these are the things that they consider important to to their college education. This is what they're looking for. They're looking to learn more about things that interest them, which we would consider a liberal education. They want to be able to get a better job, for which they need probably illiberal education. They need skills. They want to gain an appreciation of ideas. Again, liberal education. And they want to get training for a specific career, illiberal education. So students are seeking that balance. And they're seeking it, in this case, they're seeking it in one institution. They want to go to one place and get all of those things. And I'll touch on this in a little bit, but I'll say right now that although students are looking for it kind of in a one-stop shop, they don't necessarily have to get all of these things from the same institution. And they don't have to get them all in 4 years. As I mentioned, an education is the project of a lifetime. So when students do go to choose a path, they often make decisions for bad reasons. I would say on this list of things that students are considering influential, the one that I think is the most important is the academic reputation of their intended major. Almost everything else on this slide are things that do not matter. I'll add also that this, I think that the survey out of UCLA was kind to students and didn't ask them if they considered some of the sillier reasons that I often hear from students about why they attended college where they attended. You know, it had a nice gym. I think there were nice restaurants. The social scene seemed really good. There are good parties. So next I'll talk about the things that I think students really should be looking for in a college. So the first thing that I want to point out is that what matters most, if you are going to college with a career in mind and with return on investment in mind, is that your degree matters more than the institution you choose in most cases. Yes, Harvard will open doors and networks that you might not get elsewhere. But unless you're talking about very elite institutions, what matters most is the major that you choose. So let me talk a little bit about what to look for in addition to this at a university. Because if you do make a good choice of university and the university is doing its job well, it can be an excellent place to start on your journey to knowledge and to human flourishing. So the first thing I'll say, with this in mind, with this information in mind, is to find a university that fits your budget. It has to be based on realistic earnings expectations, which are available. Most students do not bother to look them up, but students should do research. As I said, in most cases, degree is what matters most, matters more than the university from which you graduate. And it should be common sense. But the debates that are going on right now about forgiving student debt show us that students have not necessarily made great decisions because they haven't used the information that is out there. Colleges also bear a lot of responsibility, but that's a talk for a different time. But students should keep in mind, if you want to become a preschool teacher or a social worker, don't go to an expensive private university. Don't take out a lot of debt. Considering real data about how much money you expect to make and how much money you will have to pay back each month if you do take out a loan. I think it's also important for students to acknowledge that college is just one step in a lifelong process of learning and flourishing. And I think, and this is probably an unpopular statement, that most universities are entirely interchangeable with each other. unless you are at a university for a very specific major that the university does really well, most majors at most universities are going to be interchangeable. If you study psychology at NC State or if you study psychology at UNC Chapel Hill, it's going to look really similar. You're not going to get something distinctly different by choosing one institution over the other. Now, there are some institutions doing things radically different. And so this isn't to say that Hillsdale isn't different from UNC Chapel Hill, because it is. But most kind of mainstream, traditional, the universities that we have come to know are pretty interchangeable with each other. So what else should you be looking for? One thing that I think is critically important is finding a university that has a great general education curriculum. And what I mean by that is that it helps you understand the world and the culture that we live in. It helps you understand the institutions that govern us. It helps you understand the history and the ideas that got us to where we are today. A good general education program should also be rigorous enough for mature learners. This is a problem that plagues universities across the country, is that rigor has been stripped from their curriculum. And so instead of getting meaty content in your courses, you end up getting the Reader's Digest version or a shortened version or Cliff's Notes. You don't get primary sources. And that is, if there's a place for that at all, it's high school. It is not college. So that general education curriculum should be rigorous enough for adult understanding. And it should also be cohesive. And this is where most universities fail. Neil Postman, who wrote an excellent book called Amusing Ourselves to Death, said, "Learning is hierarchical, an edifice constructed on a foundation with sequence and continuity." And this is something that is very controversial in education circles today. If you look at the general education of most universities, it is a smorgasbord of choices. Students can choose from, at UNC Chapel Hill, it's over 2,000 different courses that can qualify for various gen ed requirements. But at that point, when you have 2,000 choices, nothing is a requirement anymore. It's just a buffet of things that you might be sort of interested in. And they're not put together in any kind of cohesive way. And educators at universities will tell you that it doesn't matter. They will say that as long as students are learning the skills that they need for their careers, reading one book over another is inconsequential. What really matters is that they learn to write sentences. And I agree, absolutely, that learning the skill of writing is important. It's essential to do in college. But cohesion and sequence and continuity absolutely do matter. And let me tell you why. One of the reasons is that we understand new things in the context of things we already know. And that comes from Daniel Willingham's excellent book, Why Do Students Hate School? Or maybe Why Don't Students Like School? Something like that. Daniel T. Willingham, excellent. I recommend all his books. And you can see this really easily when you think about a math class. You have to know arithmetic before you do algebra. But this continuity and sequence is important in everything. Let me give you a less obvious example from literature. And the example is reading Dante. So imagine that you read Dante cold. You have the skills, you understand every single word in Dante. You have an excellent vocabulary. Your grammar is perfect, but you haven't read widely. You will be lost, because in order to understand Dante, You need first to have an understanding of the Bible. You also need to have an understanding of the Aeneid. And ideally, you need to have an understanding of Boethius' Consolation of Philosophy so that you understand the medieval Christian mindset, or you will miss out on what Dante is really saying. And as a bonus, if you read Dante, you will be able to read books like Fahrenheit 451 with new eyes so that you understand what's going on in those books. And that is true throughout all of literature. If you do not start with the foundational texts that Western civilization has been based on, and that we sometimes call the canon or the great books, you cannot build something greater. You cannot build something cohesive. Let me use an analogy that E.D. Hirsch likes to use in his books. And this is a, on a slightly different topic, but it's the same idea. If a group of students are asked to read a passage about baseball, the students who do best in reading comprehension are not the ones who are the best readers and have the best skills and the best vocabulary. The students who do best are those who know about baseball already. And so it is critically important to understand that we understand things, new things, in the context of things we already know. And so looking for that general education curriculum, I think, is the single most important thing that a person can do to build the footings. I won't call them the foundation, because the foundation are those facts that you need, the footings of the cathedral, because you have to be able to build something in order. So once you have found a school with an excellent general education program, there are some other things to look for. If there's a specific career you're really interested in, find a university that does it really well. If you want to be an engineer, or if you want to go into business, there are schools that have staked their reputation on those things, that have excellent programs that you can see it in their job placement rates, in their students' graduation rates, in their students' salaries after graduation, and in student satisfaction at those schools. And so it's possible to get something very, very targeted, and look for something very targeted if you already know exactly what you want to do. Once you have chosen a university, there are some things you can do to get the most out of it. The first thing to do is to work hard. You will get out of it what you put in. I think that's true of most things in life, but it's especially true of colleges and universities. If you slide by taking easy courses, you might get a nice piece of paper, but you will learn and grow very little. And the state of higher education is such that professors will not push you unless you want to be pushed, or unless that professor is a very, very, very dedicated person. A colleague of mine likes to make a joke about the student-faculty non-aggression pact. Students pretend to learn, and I pretend to teach. Everybody gets an A, and everybody is happy. That is a recipe for peace on a university campus, but it's not a recipe for growth. It's not a recipe for human flourishing. So work hard, regardless of what the university is setting as its basic standards. Search out the courses that will truly help you get where you need to go. Search out the professors that people say are hard. And once you find those classes, also take advantage of the learning community that you're in. Talk with your professors outside of class. Go to office hours. I hear from so many professors saying, I sit in my office hours by myself until right after an exam. And then the students show up and they want to know why they didn't do well. If you go to office hours ahead of time and engage with your professor, you will learn more. You'll make your professors, they'll be thrilled that you showed up. And you'll also have a mentor who can help guide you through the university process. But in addition to engaging with your professors, you can find like-minded students to study with. You can join a book club. You can go to the amazing library at your university that students barely use anymore. There are so many wonderful things to take advantage of at a university once you are there, but you will get out what you put in. That said, university education, the 4-year traditional residential path to learning, is not the only option. There are a lot of other options that are out there. Even the best college is not for everyone. There are financial, personal, and academic reasons that students might want to do something else. For example, some people already know that they want to work in professions that colleges don't prepare them for. So if you want to work in something that we would consider a trade or a vocation, if you want to become a mechanic and an electrician, a carpenter, any number of skilled artisan type professions, colleges simply don't have anything to offer you. They have general education to offer you, but they don't have anything to offer in terms of the skills that you need to advance. You won't be able to find the balance that you need at a 4-year university. And it doesn't make financial sense for a person who is oriented in that way to go to a university. Some people aren't personally ready for a mature learning environment. They're not responsible enough, which means that there is a low chance of success for someone to go straight out of high school, if this is their mindset, into a 4-year university. They should look for something else to further prepare them, to further mature them. Some people aren't prepared for college academically. Some people may never be prepared for college academically. And if you aren't prepared right now, or if you are not inclined to be prepared, there's very little chance of success, very little chance of getting a meaningful degree, very little chance of graduation, and a very high chance of ending up with debt, but nothing to show for it. And some people want to be entrepreneurs. And I think that this is something we're realizing more, especially with technology moving at the pace that it does. And for someone who wants to become an entrepreneur, who has an idea that they want to pursue, it makes very little sense to take on a bunch of debt to go to a traditional college program that will maybe give you skills that are outdated by the time that you leave, will maybe set you back 4 years before you're able to pursue your dream. And so for like I said, for financial, personal, and academic reasons, sometimes college doesn't make sense. Fortunately, we're undergoing a shift in higher education. It's an unbundling, a great divorce, and employers have started to recognize that our current pattern of higher education doesn't fit every job. And I've been working on compiling a list of the employers that no longer require a degree for at least some of the jobs that they offer. And as you can see on the slide, this is an impressive list of employers who demand a lot of different kind of skills. For when I've listed here Chipotle and Lowe's and Publix, I know that it is not just for people who are bagging groceries that they're not requiring a degree. Of course, that's true. But they also don't require a degree for a lot of their corporate positions. And that is something that I think people don't realize, that there are positions that you can there are positions and roles that you can consider careers that don't require a degree anymore, and companies that have started to realize that the degree isn't giving them what they need. Specifically in tech, employers have started to note that it is better to find someone who is able to, pass a coding exam than it is someone who has a piece of paper, because that piece of paper doesn't guarantee that the person's going to be a good fit for the role. Students have also started to realize that you don't necessarily have to go to a four-year college in order to be successful. And I think it is a detriment that our conventional wisdom has told students for quite a long time now that they will be failures if they don't go to a traditional university and get that bachelor's degree, because there are some excellent options out there. So I want to talk about some of the alternatives that are out here. And so I have here a quote from Ray Bradbury: "Libraries raised me. I don't believe in colleges and universities. I believe in libraries because most students don't have any money. When I graduated from high school, it was during the Depression and we had no money. I couldn't go to college, so I went to the library 3 days a week for 10 years. And I think by all of our metrics of success, we would consider Ray Bradbury to have succeeded in what he wanted to do. But going to the library isn't necessarily a practical choice for everyone. And so there are alternatives that have started to organize their educational offerings in ways that make sense for students and for users. Some of them have existed forever. If you're interested in knowledge for knowledge's sake, knowledge, the learning for learning itself, Bible study is not new. Going to the library is not new. But some of these are new. And if you are interested in gaining skills, community college and the military are not new ideas. But again, some of these are. I'll talk a little bit about some of the alternative education, coding academies. Praxis is a new learning model run out of South Carolina that pairs students directly with technology and marketing and communications type roles, and allows students to essentially be apprenticeships and work while they are attending. And the companies with which they are paired pay 100% of the cost of college. Lambda School does something very similar for coding. And if a student is really interested in going and finding skills, and that's what's in their budget, there are a lot of options out there. Apprenticeships are obviously a very, very old idea that have started to come back. Trade schools have started to come back as well. And I credit actually Mike Rowe, the Dirty Jobs guy, for giving a lot of credit to people who do, jobs that don't have you sitting behind a desk every day, but are incredibly valuable in terms of human dignity and valuable in terms of our economy. I just found outlier.org browsing on the internet a couple days ago, and you can go on there and learn calculus, an entire calculus class with credits that transfer for $400. You can also do, calculus 2 or statistics. And, additionally, there's always the option of getting a job and learning on the job. I think that we discount that in our modern lives, that getting a job has value and dignity and can help someone to flourish. There is a lot to be learned on the job, and there are jobs where learning on the job, learning as you are doing, is absolutely the best way to go. In terms of liberal education, learning for learning's sake, most of the things listed on this side are not for credit. They won't transfer to a college or university. They are options, for the love of learning. The Catherine Project and House of Humane Letters are very focused on literature, focused on reading groups. They have conferences talking about the great books. Khan Academy has courses that are sometimes directed at younger people, but their courses that they label AP courses are are things that adult learners can absolutely use. The Khan Academy art history course is one that I've looked into myself, and it is just for leisure, as Aristotle put it in his idea of liberal learning. The purpose of learning about art history is leisure. Learning for learning's sake, learning because you love beauty. And Wondrium is something you've probably heard of. It used to be called the Great Courses, and now that's been incorporated into a larger project. And there are videos and courses on a huge number of issues and subjects that anyone can take for any reason. And this represents a tiny fraction of the options that are out there. There are so many more if you look, and actually I have a larger list on the Martin Center's website that I can share. And this tiny subset is growing every day. As I look at alternatives, as I look online for different things to recommend, there are always more, because as I said, we are in a time of great change for higher education. I think that the pandemic actually opened people's eyes to the value of alternatives and to the very low value that a lot of students were getting from our legacy higher ed institutions. And so that is a silver lining of the pandemic, that we're seeing a new flourishing of educational opportunities. So I want to conclude now that higher education, regardless of which path you choose, regardless of where you are in that journey, is not something that you can let happen to you passively. I think a lot of students coming out of K-12 would love to find something where you just go and you let someone else make all the decisions for you, and you allow higher education to wash over you passively, and you osmose it by being in the learned atmosphere. But that doesn't work. Higher education is a purposeful decision that a person makes to start on a path of lifelong flourishing, building a cathedral that is both strong and beautiful, building on that foundation of facts and the footings that you need in your general education, building on the knowledge you have, over a lifetime, to flourish both in your career, to grow in your career, to grow in whatever your calling is, as well as to grow in ideas and in understanding of yourself and the world around you, to grow in appreciation of beauty, to grow in discernment, to grow in all three types of knowledge that Aristotle talks about. And so with that, I will conclude and open it up for questions.
All right. Well, Dr. Robinson, thank you so much. That was fascinating to hear your insights into the landscape of higher education. We do have time for Q&A, and we can start off. There's one question already in the chat box. It's coming from a psychologist and the director of a counseling center at a public university. And she mentions the increase in mental health needs amongst university students, alongside a trend to provide more mental health services for college students. And she's asking, and if I get any elements of the question wrong, please type it in the chat box, correct me. But what are your thoughts, Dr. Robinson, on universities taking on the responsibility of being responsible, taking on the responsibility for the mental health of their students? I can think number of different aspects, number of different layers to this question here. Can you read it in the chat box, Dr. Robinson?
I can see it. I think that the questioner here is right to be concerned. Universities, as originally conceived, were built and were organized to teach, to discover, to research, and to do outreach and share the discoveries. They were never built to be all things to all people. And I think that has become the demand of a lot of students and parents, that a university provide everything a student could need. Universities already provide housing, they provide food, they provide legal services, they provide healthcare. And now, as this questioner says, there's a push to provide more and more mental health services. But I think that the function of a university should be, it should be mission focused. It should be the delivery of education, the discovery of knowledge, the transmission and retention of knowledge, and doing things kind of outside of its purview means that universities will be stretched too thin, and they will not be kind of the best providers of that need. I also think that part of the mental health crisis is obviously COVID. We've seen that, not just students, but all kinds of people who have been isolated. But I think something else that universities should kind of keep in mind is that universities, in the education they were providing, used to help students make meaning and understand the world that they were in. Providing students with a smorgasbord of options and telling them that, kind of in a postmodern way, that there is no meaning, everything is as good as everything else, gives students anxiety. I think the way universities are teaching, a lot of the things they're teaching are sources of students' anxiety. So I think universities' role is actually to go back to their mission, think about how they're teaching, and equip students better to find meaning in their lives instead of treating the symptom, which is mental health problems.
Well, we've got another question coming in from one of our Thales students, and I'll just go ahead and read it out, Dr. Robinson. So today, with a vast amount of people trying to get degrees and more individuals graduating from high school, 2.7 million in the 2018-2019 school year, according to the National Center for Education Statistics, wouldn't it be or provide a better edge for a candidate for a job having a college degree showing that they are educated in the field they are applying for?
Yes, in some fields, not necessarily. Let me tell you about my own hiring experiences. So I work at a think tank here in Raleigh, North Carolina, and in Raleigh, as you mentioned, more and more people have degrees. It's very easy to find someone with a master's degree or even a Ph.D. But what the Martin Center really needs is people who understand our mission and people who can write really, really well. So that's what I'm looking for. And people with excellent discernment, actually, as well. And so when I am looking at a resume, I'm looking for those particular things. And I actually pay more attention to someone's cover letter than I do for the courses they've taken or the degree that they happen to have. And so I agree 100% that showing you are educated in the field that you're applying for is essential. Showing that you are ready to be a valuable contributor in that field, absolutely. But I think that the tie between that and a degree is weaker than it has been in the past, simply because so many people have degrees. and colleges have watered down degrees to a very large extent.
Well, Dr. Robinson, I've got a question about scholarships versus grants. Could you give some details, perhaps your maybe top three scholarships that you would recommend students to apply for, just navigating some of the difficulties in paying for college? What would be your recommendation?
So unfortunately, I'm not gonna be a very good source of knowing specific scholarships to apply for. So I'm gonna have to punt on that one. But I can give some general advice that kind of everyone should know, and that is how to decipher the university's financial aid letters that they will send to you. This is something I've been paying attention to for a long time. So universities, if you're student or you get into a university and you're accepted and they send you your financial aid packages, and they lump together grants, loans, and the work study programs, they lump it all together so that on the bottom line, it looks like you're actually having to pay very little. So some of the best advice that I can give is learn to read those financial aid letters from universities as a skeptic, because universities often want it to look very rosy when actually there's a lot of borrowing that is included in that package that they want you to not pay a lot of attention to. The other piece of advice is that many universities will give grant aid for academic qualifications, for academic excellence, if you apply early enough. The deadline for qualification for academic grants is often earlier than the general deadline for admissions. And so pay careful attention to that when you are applying for college, because the deadlines they're often different, and you can miss out on grant aid that is automatically given to excellent students just by missing the deadline. Okay, I see another question here, a follow-up. Okay, it's about what can you do to show that you're educated in a field what can you do other than pursue a degree? So absolutely get an internship, get a work study, work with a professor in your field to do, to go above and beyond. So if you are in, a social science field, for example, you can do an honors thesis with your professor. If you're in a STEM field, you can work with a professor on a research grant that they've got. And internships are also absolutely essential, because an internship is going to show you what it's like on the job in that career path that you're interested in. And in addition to, you'll learn on the job, of course, it'll telegraph to employers that you're serious about it, that you've learned something on the job, but it'll also help you narrow down whether you actually want to go in a particular field once you see, what happens in that kind of work. I've known lots of students who spent time in attorneys' offices and realized there is no way I actually want to go to law school. And that's a good thing, because they learned something about themselves. They learned something about what they would find fulfilling in a career. So yeah, internships, volunteer opportunities, and working with a professor. And most professors are thrilled to be able to work with students, because it's so hard to find students who are motivated and interested in the same things that they are. It is professors, they are delighted when they find serious students who want to pursue additional opportunities. And so don't overlook your professors as a source of really being able to kind of further your education and then also stand out to employers. How would someone work with a professor if you don't go to a college for a degree? So if you don't go to a college, if you don't go to a traditional college, then there are a lot of, as I said, there are alternatives out there. Something like Praxis is very much skills oriented to particular fields. But part-time work is a great way to do it. Coding camps are a great way to do it. You can also get, certifications in things like Microsoft, in QuickBooks. There are a lot of industry certifications that are out there that are freestanding from universities. But without knowing, I don't want to get too much in the weeds on particular advice without knowing, what your goals are. But there are a lot of options out there.
Dr. Robinson, we've got a couple of good questions in the Q&A box. So here's one. College years are known as the most formative times of our lives. So wouldn't the other aspects of college life be just as important as its academic aspects, since college develops who we are, not only academically, but also personally? I think you're uniquely poised to answer a question like this. Just how do you get the most out of those 4 years so as to contribute positively to character development? What do you think there, Dr. Robinson?
So I think that part of what's going on during those formative years is that human beings mature to an extraordinary extent between the ages of 18 and 22. And so, a lot of what we're seeing as formation is simply maturity. And that will happen in whichever environment that you choose. But I think in college, the way to make the most of it, and out of college as well, is to start as you mean to go on, which means that you should think towards the future when you are at college, when you are, wherever it is that you are, and not treat college as an extended vacation or as a chance to party or as a break from the real world or responsibility or an extended adolescence. To know that in these years, I am working to become the responsible, independent adult that everyone will expect me to be when I'm 22, when I have graduated. And so to do the things that will prepare you for that path, instead of treating college as a blow off, which far too many students do. Like I said, they skate through, they do not treat it seriously, and they treat it as a break from the real world. And I think that is a way, not to have moral formation in college. That is a way to escape from moral formation.
Well, Dr. Robinson, I think we have time. There's 2 questions in the chat box. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna, I'll leave the question about Khan Academy, Bible study, the library being alternatives to 4-year degree. Maybe we can end on answering that question, since that really hits at the heart of why you want to get educated in the first place. And that's to fill your mind with good things, to contribute positively to your character. There's a certain joy that comes with learning these things for their own sake. That's at the heart of what it means to have a liberal arts education, to go through a liberal arts education. I'm going to go down to the last question there about mental health issues in students. Today, suffering hardship, consequences of the pandemic. There's just a number of burdens that teenagers and individuals in their early 20s are experiencing. And so I'm going to rephrase the question slightly, but how can universities perhaps best help, providing a support structure, method of learning? Do you believe that universities should help these students, that they can find a method of learning that fits their needs, or should the university focus on improving academics and students are then left in the position to seek help elsewhere? How do you think universities can best help the students that they have entered into a partnership, a relationship with, to contribute to their to them personally.
Right. So I'll start by saying that I think that all universities do and should make reasonable accommodations for students, but faculty members are generally just very ill-equipped to navigate these decisions. They are experts in their fields, and someone who is, an expert in physics or biology or literature or Latin, has not been trained, has not been given the tools they need to do very much that is helpful for a student with mental health issues. Reasonable accommodations, I think, that can be navigated through the university, student services, but student services should be, to the extent that universities do anything, I think that student services should be the go-to place, because faculty members, they struggle with this. They don't know how to approach it. It's not something that they are really prepared to do. It's outside of their mission. It's outside of their own wheelhouse. And, I've heard from a lot of faculty members that they don't have the necessary understanding or education in this area to make the best decisions for their students, even if they are very dedicated and want to help. They don't know the best approach to treat or address those mental health issues. They don't know the best ways to be helpful necessarily. And so I think that this is something that we cannot rely on faculty to undertake, because it is so outside of what they are good at, of what they've spent their lives learning to do. So, student services is the place for that. And I agree, it's a huge challenge, but university's mission is obviously to help students flourish, but it is really within the realm of, skills and theoretical knowledge. And I think that there are much, much better people out there to help students to address their mental health issues.
I think that's a really good and meaningful distinction, that the mission of the university is the meaningful transfer of knowledge. However, university is from the Latin universitas, meaning community and guild. And so there's that responsibility to care, to show concern for, to love our neighbors as ourselves, the students that are there. It's a bit different from the mission of the university, which is that meaningful transfer of knowledge. But, there's still that emphasis on taking care of the whole person, educating the whole person. Dr. Robinson, if you're good, I think we have time for one last question. And explaining a little bit about Khan Academy, Bible study, the library, really as part of this overarching series of alternatives to a four-year degree. And I think there it's just speaking about the value and the love of learning, and thus continuing that educational journey when you are well beyond the four walls of a higher education institution.
Mm-hmm. So I'll start by just talking about my own experience. I've spent a lot of time in universities as a student. Got a bachelor's degree, master's degree, a Ph.D., and now as an adult learner, still seeking ways to flourish, to learn theoretical knowledge, to learn for the sake of learning. I'm always looking for sources of that knowledge, sources of that liberal learning that can help me to gain and grow in my own discernment, in my own judgment, in my, knowledge for knowledge's sake, and plug the holes in my own education. And so things like Khan Academy and Bible study and the library and all of those resources are really making up for the general education, the pieces of my general education that I did not get. Because a lot of, like I said, a lot of universities really fail to provide a good general education. And so you can go and you can find those parts of liberal learning that help you flourish just from a variety of sources. And as I said, my example with Khan Academy, you can take a course in art appreciation. It is not equivalent to getting a stamp on a piece of paper saying that you did anything. It is not learning with the purpose of going out and getting a job with it. It is learning for the sake of your own inner life, for the sake of your own personal growth, to find meaning and flourishing and learning for learning's sake.
That is a wonderful and very inspiring moment to end on, Dr. Robinson. So on behalf of the entire Thales community, the Academy, the college, the press, I just want to thank you for preparing this talk and sharing your insights about the purpose of higher education and the ways in which we can get most out of that, either the 4 years that we spend at such an institution or in all the activities that we engage in order to help us to flourish. Thank you so much, Dr. Robinson.
Thank you.
And I want to invite everyone here to our next, it's not quite a webinar, it's a conference. So to celebrate the beginning of the 2022-2023 school year, we're going to be holding a conference here at Thales Rollsville. In-person attendance is limited to Thales Academy faculty, but we are having a Zoom option so that people from outside of Thales, as well as Thales parents and students, can hear what will essentially be 3 TED Talks from myself, from Matt Ogle, and Josh Herring on the nature of what is true, what is good, and what is beautiful. Those are the 3 transcendentals, these ideas that go above and beyond the realm of human experience, go beyond categories. And we're going to be explaining how those meaningful ideas give value and purpose to the whole of life and ways in which that they connect to the grand and glorious revival in classical education that is sweeping the country right now. So I would love everyone on this webinar to attend that conference. We'll be sharing out some information shortly about how you can attend that via Zoom. And on behalf of Thales Press, thank you all so much and have a wonderful evening. And until next time, stay classy and stay classical.